Let's talk about encapsulation. What is it and why is it a good practice? Well, let's build on the previous example where we had the Ferrari class and we had a speed field or an attribute which was by default or public, but in this case it was default, meaning that we can access it from outside of this Ferrari class, right? Which we're able to do by saying something like, hey, after we create the new Ferrari instance, and we can go ahead and use dot notation to get the speed. And if we ran this, just as in our previous video, we would see that we would print 400, and that would work, but that is not the best practice. Why is that not a good practice? Well, it's not a good practice because outside of the Ferrari class, we could then go ahead and tweak this, and that may not be what we want. We don't want to allow this, right? We can change that to 600 miles an hour, and then if we printed that afterwards, after we changed it, we can verify that it was changed. And let's run it and confirm that and show that that is not a good rule of thumb. Why? Because we're allowing for other clients, other pieces of our code, whether we write or other people write these pieces of code, and we can modify this speed attribute, which it is not a good practice. Why? Because what we want to do is we want to make sure that that is not available. So what do we want to do? We want to set them as these attributes as private, for example. Why? Because that means that here in the main class we cannot get to it. You can see that here it is not accessible, and at compile time, and at runtime we know that it is going to blow up, just like our previous video. So what is the solution then? How could we go ahead and tweak this? Well, tweak the speed attribute. Well, what we want to do is we want to set our attributes private, and then we want to go ahead and set public setter and getter methods. What does that mean? That means that we want to say something like public get speed, and we want to then return this dot speed, and here what we're going to do is we're going to return an integer. And so this is what a getter method is, right? This is a getter method. It's just an it accesses a specific field or attribute. This is a getter method. This is a getter, and we also want a setter method. What does a setter method do? Well, we want it public as well. It's going to not return something, and it's going to set the speed. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass an integer and say some value. And we're going to then say this dot speed equals whatever the value is, right? Whatever, or miles per hour, whatever it is that we want to set here. We can do something like that. So this is the setter method. Now, what is that? Why is this important? This is the rule of thumb. This is what encapsulation is all about. Encapsulation meaning we want to encapsulate our attributes and our class, for example, this data, we want to set it as private and encapsulate it so that you can only access these attributes via their getter and setter methods. So getter methods are going to return the value. Setter methods are going to change the value of that attribute, and this is the best practice, right? This is what we want to follow. We want to strive to do this for all of our classes, right? And attributes and methods. And so what's the big benefit? Let's talk about that for a second. Well, the benefit is that, as we saw, now we can't get this, right? Now we have to go ahead and we can't access that speed attribute directly. Now we have to do dot notation and say get speed. And this will get it to us, right? This will get it to us. If we ran this, we'll see that we do get the 400. This is what we want to do. Why? Because it is, again, private, and we can't access it directly. We have to access it only through this class or this object, and this object does have this method, get speed, and that method itself belongs to this class, so we can access the speed attribute via the getSpeed method, which is perfect. Now, why is this a good idea to do the setter method? Well, again, because you can't do this. You can't say Ed's Ferrari speed equals 600 now, right? You can't do this, which is great. We don't want to do this because we could introduce a bug this way. Anybody else in our team, another developer, other client code could introduce a bug, and we'll have side effects within our code, and we don't want to do this. So here at compile time, we'll see that speed is not accessible, and if we ran it, we would see the same thing. It would blow up. In fact, let's just run it just for completeness. We'll see that the same thing will happen here. It'll say, hey, look, this has private access, which is great. So what do we want to do if we want to go ahead and change the speed value? Well, you guessed it. We want to use the setter method, set speed. So what can we do? We can say dot notation set speed. Let's pass in 600. And then if we go ahead and print the speed again here, we should see that it goes to 600. And we do here. Now, why? What's the big benefit? We can see that this is happening, and this is good. But why? What's another cool benefit of doing this? Well, it's more flexible. It is more powerful. Don't just take my word for it. Let's try to prove it. We can prove it by going back to the Ferrari class and saying, hey, set speed. You know what? Ferraris, they don't go more than, I don't know. I'm going to make this up. Don't judge me to this, but they don't go faster than, I don't know, 1,000 miles an hour. So if somebody tried to do, set the speed to 2,000 miles an hour, we shouldn't allow them to set the speed to that, right? Because we know it's not physically possible as of this recording anyway. So let's just say that if, I'm going to have an if condition here that says if miles per hour, right, is it's greater than or equals to 1,000 miles an hour, go ahead and just return. Otherwise, well, go ahead and set the speed here. So what would that mean? That means that if we go here and we say, hey, let's make it 2,000 miles per hour, what's going to happen? Well, we know it's not going to set this, right? We know it's not going to set it to 2,000, so it just returns, and we print the value again here, which is 400. That's exactly what we get. Now, you could go ahead and print something like, hey, you can't set a speed for, anything greater than 1,000, and that's fine. But just for my demonstration purposes, you can see that this is what's happening. If it's over 1,000 or equals to 1,000, it's going to return. It's not going to set it. Otherwise, that means that this is able to run here, and we can set this to that new speed value. So again, this is encapsulation in a nutshell. This is something that we want to do whenever possible. It makes and protects our code more. It makes it more secure. It makes it more flexible. As you can see here, we can have our client code go through the setter and getter methods, and then that can have logic, and we can basically define conditional statements and whatever the case might be within our code, and that makes it really flexible and really powerful. That, again, is the beauty of encapsulation. I hope this helps.